let me preface these remarks with, I never, ever believe Israeli figures. I've been in the government too long to know that the Israelis are patent liars in their intelligence community, in their propaganda community, certainly, and in their leadership. They are inveterate liars. Let me say that again. They are liars. So you can't believe anything that comes out of Jerusalem. It's
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant, independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours. Saturday, May 18th, 2024. Thank you for joining me today. Now, unfortunately, I have just over an hour to get done something I wanted to cover today. Really one of the few or a couple of the few things that I had to pull a lot aside today. And I don't want to keep letting you know why. I'm sure you guys are aware of the building and ongoing stuff. It's impossible, it seems, to do all these things at the same time. But I'm trying to get work done at the same time as we're dealing with people building and different things happening. And so my point is to let you know it's going to be short, whether I want it to be running long or not. And I plan on giving you guys a kind of breakdown view on this, probably on one of the shows as well, just because, you know, I'm sure you guys are excited to see what it looks like other than just this right here. And so I will be doing that very soon. Unfortunately, I only have about an hour today, so I'm going to get to some important topics, and I'm looking forward to the moment where I won't be bound by these things and we'll be able to do more that, you know, what you guys have become accustomed to with less gaps in between the shows. So today we're going to talk about the important follow-up and just a couple of the points, but I want the links and information will be there for you guys to look for the rest of it, because as you know, these International Court of Justice or the World Court proceedings are long, and there's a lot of conversation, a lot of back and forth, or rather just, you know, different times they have allotted to give their view and their statements. And I wanted to make sure you saw that this hadn't gone away. This is still happening, and that the ICJ, or rather the people representing South Africa, have come forward with more follow-up and more information. And of course, Israel sends just a few delegates, demonstrating clearly that this is either they don't want us to think that they think it's important, or that they are just simply not caring what's happening here. We're also going to talk about a couple of other important things around all of this. One being that Israel continues to this moment to block food aid. Now, that's not necessarily something bombshell, but I wanted to make sure we are aware, as I showed you last time, that the aid has dropped off to near nothing over the last so many weeks, as we know that there is starvation, famine level happening. And this has been deliberate the entire time, according to everybody who has any standing in this conversation. And in regard to human rights groups and people that are, I forget the name of the group that literally made the scale of whether or not it's famine. It's all very clear this is deliberate. People from the United Nations, from media organizations, from even corporate media, openly calling them out for what they claim they're not doing, videotaping them doing so. And then on top of this, as all of us can see, the settlers that continue to destroy the food, stop the trucks, pull people out of the trucks, be violent with those people, and having celebratory actions in front of it, raves, discos. I mean, you know, they're different, but the point being that they're just different celebrations, and even beating up people. I just showed you that yesterday, I think day before yesterday, but I'm going to play, if I get time, a clip of an interview with her where she's saying that she went out there as a Jewish Israeli saying we shouldn't be destroying this food for humanitarian reasons, but she makes the point in regard to the fact that it's going to go to hostages too. She gets slapped in the face by the settlers that are trying to destroy the food. It's so disgusting how obvious all of this is. We're also going to start with a point about nanotechnology I thought was important, that I just wanted to include, that I really thought was just interesting. There's a lot of other things going on in the world than just this, as you guys well know. And of course, there was a couple other points I'll get to, but I'll leave it there just in case we don't have time. So let's go ahead and get started in regard to the ICJ, and actually starting with the nanotechnology point. Let's see, make sure I'm lined up here. Yeah, actually, I wanted to start with one thing that I really think is important, and not just for the sense of like, let's all laugh at this because these people are ridiculous. You know, a lot of the, you know, and I myself will enjoy pointing out some things to start the show that might not be newsworthy, or just because it's humorous, or because it's relevant to how bad our government is. And that's all this clip you're going to see, which most of you probably already seen. It's all of those things. And, with some of the more, in my opinion, lowbrow individuals within the Congress, whether that means that you think they're not necessarily intelligent enough to, whatever when I say lowbrow, I mean that could be intentional, just acting crude and crass, or it could be that that's just who they are. My point is that however it is, left or right, what you're going to see is embarrassing. Now, whether it's because a shocking lack of decorum in a situation where that's not necessary, even because if we're really talking about what's important politically, shouldn't you be able to make these points even scathingly so with facts? No, it goes to belittling each other and petty comments like we're in kindergarten or rather high school. And this is my point, though, is that this is relevant far more than just to acknowledge how bad these people are, or really, my opinion, that these people are in no way in control of anything, really. But because it's so alarming to recognize in so many different ways the kind of power these people have. They lord over us like some kind of ruler. And yet, in 2 points, one is that they are, like I just said, not actually in control, in my opinion. I think we can flat out prove that when it comes to larger dynamics. There's definitely power in regard to their vote and whatever else you think happens in Congress. But on top of that, that this is what the world sees us as. I really, even at a third point, I see this as representative of the intentional degradation of this country for the benefit of foreign countries, for the benefit of other politicians, whatever it is. And of course, everyone's mind in the paradigm will go to, oh, you mean Russia? Oh, you mean China? Right now, I very clearly mean Israel. But all three of those are actively something going on. My point is that this is happening in a way that is rapidly escalating, where people look at the people we have in front of us right now. And I'm not even talking about age, whether it's someone like Fetterman or somebody like, of course, I'm blanking on the top of my head, the Republican in this conversation, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who, whether it's left or right, of course, as we get into the points, the people that like that person will argue I'm some kind of lefty or righty. That's always how the two-party illusion can make sense of these objective realities. But they're all ridiculous, left and right, in this conversation. But there are special points, like I often point out, people like Maxine Waters and I'm forgetting her name. Don't know why. The other one that is going senile that can't mumbles half the time and can't, Nancy Pelosi. My point is they're ridiculous, cartoonish almost. And there's just as many on the right. We need to realize that this is how the two-party illusion works. And I've got people who from either side of this conversation are acting like what they're saying is somehow, like we're being soft. But of course, no one's trying to censor them, at least from my perspective. I guarantee this is where this tends to go, is they're going to try to act like we now to censor and control speech in this context. It's not about whether they're allowed to say it. It's about the fact that these people are demonstrating a level of juvenility. How do you say that? Being juvenile, being childish. And I think this is what is beginning to spin out into larger groups inside the paradigm, left and right, by the way. But in this case, you can have some people that I already see defending Marjorie Taylor Greene as if it's, honorable almost to be able to say these kind of, you get the point. I can go on. I think this is important. That's why I took as long as I did to say that, because I genuinely think that this is a dangerous thing that is bleeding into the conversations. Like, it's acceptable to act this way, which of course you're allowed to act however you want, but we can, just like with free speech, I can do this. I can say you're a child. What you're doing is not worthy of the position you hold. And it's not even to say that I respect the people in it, but the idea of what this country could be if we were actually the things that we say we are. In any case, let's watch this clip and you'll see what I mean.
I'd like to know if any of the Democrats on this committee are employing Judge Merchan's daughter.
Please tell me what that has to do with Merrick Garland.
Is she a porn star?
Oh, Goldman. That's right. He's advising. Okay.
He's advising who? What? Do you know what we're here for? You know we're here about AG.
I don't think you know what you're here for.
Well, you the one talking about.
I think your fake eyelashes are messing up.
No, ain't nothing.
Hold on.
Listen.
Now, the first thing I'll say is I don't know if that's where it started. That's important in a small way, because they're all being ridiculous. But just to be clear, who knows if there was more that led up to this? But from the clip's perspective, that's the first ridiculous shot. There's no reason to make that argument. You could just be like, you're being ridiculous, whatever. Make an argument that's based in why she's bad at her job, not making it about some obviously meant to be racial overtone comment, which is what this is about. And the same thing happens back to her. But these are unintelligent things to do. It's something that we should laugh at. Like, this is worthy of ridicule that they are allowing this, and the rest of the world looks at this and says that's how stupid Americans are. Probably all by design, by the way.
Order.
Mr. Chairman, that's beneath even you,
regain
the order of your committee.
Order.
I do have a point of order, and I would like to move to take down Ms. Green's words.
I believe that's
that is
AOC saying
absolutely unacceptable. How dare you attack the physical appearance of another person?
Okay, and even that, I'll be honest, that drives me crazy. I am the most important person in the room, and I care, and I am the victim, or whatever, like making it about her. All of a sudden, AOC is outraged. You're grandstanding. You didn't need to do that. You're trying to make it look like you're the better person. That's sad, right? My point is they're all like this. You didn't need to make that big statement right there either.
Your feelings hurt.
Her words down. Oh.
See, and that too. Your feelings hurt. Like, this is where this is where I'm like, that's my point. You're getting people on the right that act like that's somehow the way we should be. Just suck it up and be tough. Well, fine. Yeah, you can do that too. Or we should all acknowledge, though, that it's just dumb to do that in the first place, that you are a lesser person for playing this back and forth and then trying to act like it's just, you should just let it roll off your skin. Well, yeah, maybe you should, but maybe none of you should be in these positions because you're all act like children.
Girl, baby girl.
Oh, really?
Don't even play.
Baby girl.
What?
We are going to move, and we're going to take your words down.
I second that motion.
That was AOC. How embarrassing.
Ms. Green agrees to strike her words.
I believe she
Chair
should apologize.
recognizes
No.
Mr.
She
Perry.
should apologize.
Okay, hold on. Then after Mr. Perry's going to be recognized, then Ms. Green
I'm not
has 4 minutes and
apologizing.
21
Well,
seconds.
then
Okay,
you're not
reserve the right to
striking your
object.
words.
I am
You're
not
not
apologizing.
Now let's go. Come on, guys.
This is like a kindergarten.
Why don't you debate me?
Mr. Chairman,
What?
the minority.
No, this is just not the place for any of this. Now, look, I'm sure most Americans, myself included, don't care much about these people or their processes because they're all criminals. But the point is that in general, if it wasn't like that, of course we should have some level of decorum. We're supposed to pretend that this is important stuff, right? And the fact that why don't you debate me? Like, have that conversation somewhere else. You're trying to make this your podium where you stand there and everything. It's all about you guys. They all do it. It's not just Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's just really bad.
Self-evident.
You're not.
Yeah, you're not.
out of order.
You don't have enough
You're out of order.
intelligence.
Chair recognizes Mr. Perry.
Okay, move to strike
I'd like to strike
move to
those
strike the
words
lady's
as well.
words.
As one of the dumbest people in the room, in my opinion.
Move to
I would
strike
like to
the
order.
lady's
Well.
words again.
That's 2 requests to strike. That's 2 requests to strike.
Oh, they cannot take the
There's
words.
another motion to strike her words again. Please
All right.
get
Okay.
your members under
Here's
control.
the correct apology. Ms. Green, do you agree to unanimous consent to
God.
strike your words?
I repeat again for the second time. Yes, I'll strike
right.
my words.
Well, repeating would be the second time, just so we all understand how dumb that was.
But I'm not
All right.
apologizing.
Without objection. Without
Not
objection.
apologizing.
Chair recognizes-
If you need to repeat it again, that would be more than twice, but we'll let that slide.
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Who's
It's me.
Ms. Crockett?
I'm just curious, just to better understand your ruling. If someone on this committee then starts talking about somebody's bleach blonde, bad built butch body, that would not be engaging in personalities, correct?
A what now?
God. Like we don't all know what that, you're just using that moment to lash back out. Oh, what now? It's just people. I have no respect for literally anybody in this room. Well, maybe save for a few of the, and I question all of them, but, like a Massey, for example, because I often agree with most of the stances he tends to take, not all, but very, very few examples where I think these people are worthy of your respect.
Chair.
And by the way, since I made the point, I'm sure somebody will go, oh, and here's Ryan calling them stupid. And well, there's a very different thing from my perspective and being in this conversation. Like, yeah, you can say it's petty that I can call them unintelligent, but it's a very different reality to be sitting in a situation where you're supposed to be showing decorum in some kind of political dynamic and then using that to say those things. This is my show and my ability. I can, that's a very big difference.
Chairman, I make a motion to strike those
I
words.
don't think that's a
Hold on.
I'm
parliament.
trying to find clarification on what quality.
Chairman, motion to
I have
strike
no
those
idea
words.
what you just said.
Obviously
We're not gonna do this. Look, you guys.
I mean, I got to be honest though. Like, how does this happen? in a situation where, I mean, do you realize how many intelligent, well-versed, and I mean like really well-versed, not just, been in the field that long, and so you talk like you know what it goes on in Iran, but you've never been there. People that are really genuinely well-versed in politics and deep politics and everything. And that these are the people that end up in these positions. Some 20-something that has no idea, that would make these kind of ridiculous comments. And I'm not even talking about her in particular. It's just, how does that even happen? Well, we pretend it's because democracy, and that's what you guys all wanted. Do we really believe that still? Anyway.
Earlier, literally just.
You just voted to do it.
Y'all did it first, so you don't want to talk about
voted to do it.
Order.
We're not gonna do this. Look, you guys earlier literally just.
You just voted to do it.
Y'all did it first, so you don't want to talk about
voted to do it.
Order.
I'm trying to get clarification.
Look at calm down.
No, because this is what y'all do. So I'm trying to get
Miss
clarification.
Crockett, you're not recognized. Miss
I can't hear
Crockett.
you with your yelling.
Don't want me
Calm
to be-
down.
No,
Can you please calm down?
And that's like the 5th person to come up and whisper something to him. What the hell is going on?
Tell me to calm down.
Calm down.
Because y'all
Please
talk
calm
noise,
down.
and then
You're
can't
out of
take
control.
Because if I
Look,
come,
Chairman,
if I
can we
come
send
and
her
talk
outside to
shit
take a
about
break
her,
for 5
y'all
minutes?
gonna have a problem.
Mr.
Order.
And now she's cursing, Again, I don't really care all that much, but it's about the decorum. It's about the situation you're in. And I care that this is how the world views all of us because of how bad these people are.
All right, chair.
I don't know why
Okay.
you're
Order.
acting
Chair
like-
now.
Now, guys, this is just one little glimpse. If you pay attention to this stuff, which it's hard to do, which is why I barely do anymore, because it's usually meaningless and it's chock full of nonsense and lies and undermining. It's just, it's bad. And it wasn't always at least this visibly bad. So anyway, I thought that was a relevant point to make sure we see where we really are in this country, guys. And it's scary. It's alarming to me that we're in a situation where at least the perception is that these are the people that are making decisions that affect our lives. I mean, first of all, they're back and forth, and they're all screaming, and like I said before, it's just low brow. But then you've got the rest of them like laughing and commenting, and like it's some kind of peanut gallery. I don't know. I think the point is made. It just really does scare me that this is where we're going. At the very least, that it's the way the world perceives where we are, which is very relevant when it comes to a lot of things, not even just governmental dynamics. This stuff affects our lives. And I don't even mean voting, guys. In any case, I think that's important that we understand. As I said, we are ruled over, I should have said lorded over, by absolute children. Petty, small, manipulative children with far too much power. And the most terrifying part is when you realize that these people are not the ones actually in control. And I stand by that. I'm not saying they don't have votes and there's not some kind of overlapping power, but we need to stand back and recognize, whether it's from the executive branch or whatever the hell we're looking at right here, these people, and again, whether we're talking about, if I have time to get to it, the lobbying aspect from AIPAC or any other number of things, and I'm not even just making it about Israel. There's all sorts of lobbying that goes on. These people are completely cow to it constantly. In fact, I think that's why they find their ways in these positions, because they know they'll end up like Pelosi making $1 million a day and ultimately with nobody paying attention. That's not what this is supposed to be. When this started, this was a public service. Most of the people, if not all of them, had jobs, and then they did this. This has become a lifelong public or a lifelong position, I guess. And I don't even mean whether in Senate or in the House. I mean, this is, people are like, I mean, look at it like this. There's plenty of people that are not even in Congress anymore, but are on the talk shows, and they're still seen as sort of a lifelong politician. That's just gross to me. And that's why this is abused in so many different ways. Exactly. As Dr. Bass says in the chat, idiocracy has arrived. In fact, it's been here for a decade or more, and we need to be, if not longer. Well, I wanted to make sure we saw this, which I already made a point on this before in regard to I think it was the Equal Health Alliance aspect of this from the Select Subcommittee on Coronavirus. And they basically made the point that the HHS is now beginning to cease all of the funding. I mean, it's all coming down in different ways, but I don't think it's honest. I don't think that it's going to account or end up with any real accountability. Even, let's just even say the Equal Health Alliance in general and DASAC and people like that go to jail. That doesn't stop the actual government process. And that's what, I mean, what I think is every dynamic, every angle of this, left and right, global aspects. And it's not just going to stop by look at it like this. That's like killing Epstein and pretending like that's all it was and it's over and it was just one anomaly. No, it wasn't. And we all know that. This is another example in the same committee where this was Congresswoman Debbie Lesko asking, did NIH fund gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology? Now, we know this, and it says through EcoHealth. We know this question. Fauci has smugly dismissed it multiple times, going, there's no, even grandstanded back against Rand Paul, making it sound like, you, sir, don't know what you're talking about. And that's when they played the whole EPPP game and pretended like that's what it's been. No, you changed that like moments before the hearing for the most part. What's interesting about this clip, and I don't need to play it for you, he basically says, did you fund it? And he says, if you're speaking about generic term, yes, we did. He basically kind of waffles for a second and says, basically, well, okay, it doesn't even matter whether we're talking about generic term versus, if you did gain a function in some form, then Fauci lied. And we all know that. But the worst part is he goes, but that, the term you're addressing is not dangerous to anybody. That's what he says. I can't even believe, so this is my point. It's about admission, but while cementing the thing that they want to move forward with. It's not dangerous. We're going to keep doing it, whether we call it EPPP or gain of function or whatever else we name it tomorrow. And we're going to pretend that because of this, it's not dangerous, but just what Fauci did was. And that is how this works. That's why you get the breaking story of something we've been talking about for 4 years, because it's about contorting it into something that works for the agenda. So I wanted to use that to highlight where we are in all of this. It's just been going on for a very long time, and I wanted to give you a quick flashback, I think the health bot here, of a clip that I've played before. But this goes back to, I think it's like 20 years ago, and the bottom line is that they're talking about when geoengineering hadn't even been really acknowledged, been focused on, and the point is that there are people speaking up and saying that it was happening and that they were collecting what was falling. And guess what? It was barium and aluminum and, in nanoparticle form and elsewise, yeah. And that's exactly what we've talked about. I've interviewed, back when he was doing the work, Patrick Roddy from StopSprayingUs.com. He tested the water almost daily from San Francisco for years. Every time, high levels of barium, high levels of aluminum, way beyond the safe levels, just like this clip tells you, and nothing was ever done about it. It just drifted backward into conspiracy theory, even though this kind of clip was played on corporate media, and we know that this is way further than where we are right now, or than where further than in this clip. Where we are now is way further than what's in this clip.
Substance found by a Southwest Arkansas man be part of a government test? Well, that's the question at the heart of a phenomenon called chemtrails, now getting widespread attention. Well, tonight, KSLA News 12 investigation reporter Jeff Farrell shows us the results of testing we had done about what's in our skies.
It seemed like some mornings it was just crisscrossing the whole sky. It was just like a giant checkerboard.
Bill Nichols snapped several photos of the strange clouds from his home in Stamps, Arkansas. They begin as normal contrails from a jet engine, but do not fade away like a normal contrail. Soon after, he saw particles in the air.
Because we'd see it drop to the ground in a haze.
Nichols then noticed the material collecting on the ground.
This is water and stuff that I collected in bowls. I had it set out in my backyard on my dad's pickup truck.
KSLA News 12 had the sample tested at a lab. The results? A high level of barium, 6.8 parts per million. More than 3 times the toxic level set by the EPA.
Armed with these lab results about the high levels of barium found in our sample, we decided to contact the Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality. They told us that yes, these levels are very unusual, but at the same time they added the caveat that proving the source is a whole nother matter.
And they know that, and this is an important part. I mean, this overlaps with the conversation of East Palestine and Norfolk Southern, and the huge story that all the details are out about, which shows they broke the law and nobody seems to care about. We've covered it 55 times, where they knew that it wasn't going to explode. They lied to the volunteer fire chief. They made him make the decision. They blame him for doing the whole, and it's just this disgusting reality. I mean, it's just ongoing in every direction you look. I mean, I was even just watching again this old movie called Dark Waters, and not that old, but about Teflon and DuPont, and how literally nothing happens to these people. And we can have movies about it, and they knowingly hurt the country and nobody seems to care. It's just, and I'm going to make a point again about the 239 times that we know about that your government has tested on you.
Barium is a hallmark of other chemtrail testing, which even attracted attention from a Los Angeles TV station. There's already no shortage of unclassified weather modification programs by the government. But those who fear chemtrails...
And by the way, just don't miss how ridiculous it is. This is being talked about as if it's just common knowledge. But right now, most of the news outlets would regard this as conspiracy theory. It's the same documentation. It's all provable. They're just, as we're watching the politicians kind of degrade into a bunch of kindergarten children, we're also watching the media degrade into some kind of following repeaters. And, even though they've always kind of been both those things, we're watching it get really, really ridiculous. And I argue it's because we are waking up more and more to the reality of what's going on, and more people are seeing it, calling it out, and not falling for their lies anymore. So what do? They get desperate.
Could be secret biological or chemical testing on the public. Point to the 1977 Senate hearings in particular, which confirmed 239 populated areas had been contaminated with biological agents between 1949 and 1969.
And that's even more important, by the way. And just so you know, this is the citation that we've referenced many times, despite countless screamers acting like it's fake news. It's a verifiable fact the government released. And this is the point. It only goes to the 60s. I highly doubt that it stopped at that point, especially as we just watched one of the biggest experiments in our human species, which was the COVID-19 illusion. They've done this. They're still doing it.
Later, the 1994 Rockefeller report concluded hundreds of thousands of military personnel were also subjected to secret biological experiments over the last 60 years.
Disgusting.
But could secret testing be underway yet again?
I'd rather it be something inert and benign, something that's, not causing any damage, but I'd like to know what it is.
KSLA News 12 discovered chemtrails are even mentioned by name in the initial draft of House Bill 2977 back in 2001 under the Space Preservation Act. But the military denies any such program exists. Jeff Farrell, KSLA News 12 reporting.
And, it turns out until 9 years ago, the government had the right under U.S. law to conduct secret testing on the American public under specific conditions.
Jeez.
Only a public outcry repealed part of that law, with some exceptions.
Yeah, but it didn't, though. And this is how it always works. It didn't repeal anything. All it did was cement into law their allowance to do it when certain things are happening or certain situations mean, which, by the way, they can bend into making it mean anything, anytime, anywhere they want. That's how this works. We've talked about it 100 times. The idea that you can, or like War Powers Act, or the Patriot Act, or any number of things where they literally, people scream about a problem and they go, oh, it's a problem? Okay. And they write a bill that addresses it, but actually creates the justification for it forever. And they go, okay, well, we solved it, right? It's not illegal anymore, so we're not breaking the law. The problem wasn't that you were breaking the law. The problem was that this is not something Americans want. So creating a law that makes it no longer illegal suits only your interests. That's your government for you.
Now, Jeff's report mentioned high levels of barium linked to those alleged chemtrails. We wanted to find out exactly what effects barium has on the body.
Alzheimer's.
We spoke with Mark Ryan, the director of the Poison Control Center. Ryan tells KSLA News 12 that short-term exposure can lead to anything from stomach to chest pains. Long-term exposure causes blood pressure problems. Ryan addressed concerns by chemtrail researchers that barium could be meant to wear down a person's immune system.
Oh my gosh, did you hear that?
Anything that causes ill effects on the body long-term chronically is going to affect your ability because it's constantly working on the body. So from that aspect, yeah, that's a potential.
There you go. Right? So just so happens to work to reduce your immune system, accidentally, like all the other things they're doing to you. What a big surprise. Now, let's also not forget that this is something that has been building for a long time past that. And I'm not saying we can prove that these are the same thing, but I think it's easy to think about the overlap. If we're talking about a long-term experimentation program using any number of things on the population, dropping them from the sky, barium, aluminum, these are nanoparticles, guys. And let's not forget, by the way, before we even go forward, what Dr. Pilevsky and plenty of others have said. What do nanoparticles do?
I heard earlier that there's no real concern about aluminum because it's such a small amount, and so it really shouldn't matter. But the kind of aluminum that we put into vaccines is a different kind of aluminum that we see environmentally. This is called a nanoparticle, and nanoparticles bind really tightly to the bacteria antigens, the virus antigens, the food protein antigens, and any other contaminants that are in the vaccines that we may not know about. And we know that the biochemical properties of nanoparticles is that they are capable of entering the brain. And so we have not evaluated the safety of the aluminum nanoparticle and its injection and where it goes when it gets into the body and whether it gets into the brain. Do vaccine ingredients belong in the brain? No. Do they get into the brain? No one has ever studied it. But animal studies using the same chemicals that are in vaccines that we give to children directly demonstrate that the vaccine ingredients do enter the brain.
Great clip, by the way. Dr. Pilevsky is someone worth following. The important thing is to understand that these things almost seem to be designed for that. And either way, and another point, by the way, which I failed to highlight in the past, is that he's talking about right there that these nanoparticles that are in these injections or other things we're talking about bind very tightly to the supposed accidental byproducts or contaminants, or the intentional DNA contamination, or the all the things we just talked about, which then make sure that those things are what enter the brain. Not hard to see how it might be a weapon system or accidental or deliberate. I just find it impossible to even pretend like some of this stuff is accidental with how many times we've seen it. But in any case, let's make sure we see to finish this segment that this is something that this is from 2023. Wireless in the blood. The bottom line, biological computing machines such as micro and nano implants or nanotech, smart dust level conversations that can collect important information inside the body are transforming medicine. Yet networking them for communication has proven challenging. But guess what they just did to try to figure that out? Now a global team, including EPFL researchers, has developed a protocol that enables a molecular network with multiple transmitters. First, it says there was the Internet of Things. We've talked about this many times. Now, at the interface of computer science and biology, like what Klaus Schwab and the rest of them told you is happening right now, the convergence of those things, the Internet of bio-nano things promises to revolutionize medicine and healthcare. Yeah, well, all of this is exactly what we're talking about. The nanolipid nanoparticle, the Lieber and Langer, the Charles Lieber, Robert Langer overlap the information, Langer being the co-founder of Moderna. This is their research. Point is, this is not hard to see the overlap to. And let's not forget, we just talked about this in January 16th of this year, gain-of-function's newest brain virus. That's interesting. So we're talking about something that seems to go toward goes to the brain. We're talking about gain of function. He just admitted, yes, they do gain of function, which we already know. You can see how all of this can connect with not just the gain of function Wuhan lab, but other things we're discussing. The idea of smart dust, the idea of geoengineering, this stuff is not, it is clearly intersecting. And it scares me. The idea of what we've talked about, the smart dust conversation, which again, it surprises me how few people seem to know that this is not an old conversation or a new conversation. Smart dust goes back decades. DARPA was where this originally started from, at least as we can prove, and it goes back a long time, at least 20 years or more. And this was used. It has been used. It is a real concept, and it is tiny flecks of dust that you cannot see that can work on your own body's energy. If you don't think this is real, it's very clear to see. At the very least, the government claims it is. Very good question to ask whether they could be lying about that, but it's interesting to see. Now, on top of that, I want to reference the work on that very point that was referenced in there, and we did this in a follow-up in 2020. In Coronavirus We Trust, medical surveillance state for a government that's experimented on you 239 times, at least that we know about. And here was and this is originally a Free Thought Project article in regard, not this one, but the point we make, we reference it down here 239 times, but the U.S. Army has admitted to conducting hundreds of germ warfare tests on Americans. And this goes over that information that's originally from the Free Thought Project. It's very, very clear. And this is just to the 60s, and we know it went well past that. Now, I'll include some other points in here that we've discussed in the past. This is from Nanotherapeutics. It's an older article. Nanotherapeutics' primary focus is to develop new inhalation, nasal, and injectable delivery systems to improve therapeutic outcomes. Proprietary powder processing techniques are being developed to improve delivery of traditional drugs, as well as proteins, gene therapies that cannot be taken orally. I don't even need to highlight the overlap, do I? I mean, it's obvious that this is not new. Inhaled delivery systems are of particular importance since there will be hundreds of new bioengineered drugs entering the marketplace in the next few years. Gee, is that what we all want? Is that what we decided? Is that what even we're being told? Hardly. Including recombinant proteins, growth factors, cytokines, monoclonal antibodies, and antibiotics. This is from 2002. Realize that this is not what we're being told. This stuff's happening already. That's where we are. This is an older article from 1994, Human Experimentation, going over the things we just discussed if you want the citation to prove it for yourself. Here is from 2019. Research into deadly viruses and biological weapons at U.S. Army labs shut down over fears that they could escape. Certainly could just be a big ruse to justify what they released or did on purpose, but either way, How do we pretend that these things don't all connect into what literally was happening from there forward? This is 2019. Now, I just thought that was important to highlight. Let's also include something I think is generally related, tangential at least, in regard to the Great Reset and all these conversations. Wall Street Silver reports that the digital ID has now been passed in Australia, which shouldn't be shocking. It's already real in a lot of places that just don't acknowledge that. But this is coming. This is happening. And as he writes, there was their ultimate goal with COVID-19, 15-minute cities coming. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily make those two things to connect all the time because you don't need a digital ID realistically to make that kind of 15-minute city reality. But obviously they overlap. And I think it's really about tracking. It's about control. It's about, the vaccine passport conversation. It comes down to basically being able to lock you out of a system, which obviously connects to the 15-minute city. But I find it much bigger than that. That just kind of seems to be the general focus of a lot of the partisan perspective. And it's worthy of concern. The Gaza point, the Lahaina, all these different things are not something to be dismissed. But I wanted to make sure we saw that this is happening. Here's Pelham highlighting. This is Alex Karp, who we just recently talked about, who just admitted he's an American Jewish billionaire using spyware to intercept phone calls from international citizens. Why in the world is that acceptable to any other government that are speaking with Palestinians? And then Palantir, his company, is selling that information to the IDF, who uses it to target Gazans, which we know they've killed over 15,000 children. And their own people, by the way. So how is this a public conversation? They're literally using an illegal access to kill innocent people. Maybe Alex Karp should be held accountable for that. What do you think? And don't not forget, Palantir has already agreed to work with a strategic partnership with Israel to develop their battle tech. And that's Lavender. That is Hobsora. That's the AI-targeted murder machine that their own people have called out. Here is Fed Scoop saying Northern Command calls upon Palantir, Apple, and others to bring about new tech to fight coronavirus. That's 2020. Seems like Palantir is kind of a central role. You know that. Whitney and I have talked about it a lot. I wanted to have a conversation with her soon about that. And then on top of that, Meta provides an Israeli AI system information to target Palestinians through WhatsApp. This is everywhere. These people are literally facilitating genocide and letting them use their tech to target innocent civilians. On top of that, Yunus Tarawi points out something really alarming, more than all of it. He says, this is disgusting. Today, Israeli forces threw pamphlets over skies, and this was the 17th, of Dar Balah, blackmailing Gaza residents to reveal their criminal intent and records, at least what they perceive to be criminal intent, and records held by the Palestinian police. If they don't cooperate with the occupation forces and also reveal people who gave tips to them, they will be targeted, attacked. This is what we've been seeing. And the point here is that this is interesting. And of course, this will play into a small degree what the kind of play is about how Israel's some kind of bastion of peace for people in the LGBT community, which is a shocking lie if you really look into it. And we've covered this plenty of times. But the point is that it's supposed to be the better place than Palestine, which again, is not even as accurate they pretend it to be. But I can clearly see a difference in the perception coming from a more strict religious mindset on either side of the conversation. But in either case, he says here they reveal personal details. So again, we're talking about these basically Israeli intelligence threatening average people, dropping these saying, you better inform on anybody around you. If they're doing something not supposed to, you better tell us or we're going to deem you Hamas, which then gets them killed, even though there's no evidence to back that up. But it says here they reveal personal details of a Palestinian who happens to be in the LGBT community, who's gay or something like that, and reveal his personal details to the public. Now, it says the guy probably refused to cooperate with the Israeli military, so they outed him. But whatever it is, if your argument is that they're not safe in Palestine, and then you out him to the Palestinians, how in the world is that supposed to be something that's how it shows you what the Israeli government is? And of course, the Palestinians and the pro-Zionist, pro-Israeli entities that are lying about everything are going to say, yeah, he deserves it. But even though otherwise they would argue that this is why Israel's better because... how do you make sense of that? It only shows you the depravity, the kind of disgusting hatred they have for people, even as they pretend they're fighting for these kind of concepts. But on top of that, it says they have a search engine of the Palestinian civil registry in Gaza that any resident can search up using his ID to see if someone gave tips on him and who and whom. It says, let's say their details, let's say someone stole, he says, did an illegal act, etc. They now are revealing all of his files. And it says if you have ever told the Palestinian police anything against any people that you suspect have committed a crime, they will out you and label you as a Hamas informant. You see how broad that is? That's because they've argued that any policeman is suddenly Hamas, even though the U.S. government spoke up and said, hey, stop killing the policemen that are trying to guard the aid. They're not Hamas. They keep making the argument they are because to them, literally everybody is Hamas. And again, don't forget, that's because they made sure Hamas would be in power to keep the division between the West Bank and Gaza. It's Netanyahu's own statements in the Likud meeting from 2019 that Haaretz covered, which shows you that they made sure they would be in power. And that means that everybody there forward had to work through the facilities of Hamas, which then labeled them as Hamas collaborators through Israel's perspective. That's intentional. So they were all Hamas. My point is they're creating a situation where they're telling you tell on your neighbor or make something up. And if you don't, we're going to label you as Hamas. It's one more way to make everybody Hamas no matter what actually happens. Now, I want to make sure we saw this because I just think it's important to follow up. We just covered this. Hamas claims, and by the way, it's funny, the guy that I was talking about the other day who was screeching about how I secretly hate Jewish people, even though it's just one of the most absurd, somebody who was doing good work in COVID, I thought, made me very sad. My point is I went through this, and the argument is Hamas claims Israel bombed IDF troops under Hannibal Directive. Now, don't forget, Ryan Grimm was the one that was reporting on what they claimed. Israel then reported that it actually happened, not that they bombed their own people, but that the people died. So you can clearly see the story is real, but the narratives around it are spinning. And I said explicitly in this show, you should question what Hamas says just as much as you question what Israel says. Of course, the person who didn't watch this and reads the headline goes, eating all of the Hamas propaganda. I'm just embarrassed for these people. They just have either a blind spot for anything Israel related, or they've been dishonest about everything. We should really be asking these questions. The point is, it's like for them to say that you're going to repeat or report anything Israel says as what is all the media does, that Israel claims X, Y, and Z. Suddenly that's okay, but I'm not allowed to say Hamas claims something while including we should be very skeptical of any claim from any side. You know, it's just sad. Obviously, an objective person can see a one-sided concept right there. We should be reporting what any side says. And I often report what Israel claims. But of course, I fill in the gaps with the fact that they've been caught lying 45 times right up until that point, but we should still consider it. I just think it's important to recognize how people are being dishonest, and not in many of them, not even intentionally. They just don't see that they're blind to this conversation. But I think that's a minority. But in any case, the point was we just talked about the fact that the UN did not have the death toll. It's still the reality, and it's shockingly easy to see if you just look for yourself. And of course, read this important article Robert put out that just breaks this down. We wrote it together technically. Well, I added a large enough section where he wanted me to put my name on it. The point was that we both put this out, and it's very, 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 very clear. It's obvious they're lying. But here is Jeffrey Mead tripling down as one of the many people I highlighted the other day. And this is from 2 days ago. After this broke that they were lying, after the UN came out and said, no, we did not do that, he goes back to it, really trying to push in the main thing that now becomes the general lie that's being pushed, which is we're past the idea they halved it. We're pretending that we never said that. All we're trying to say is, look, can't you see that the number of children and women are halved? And that means that if you add up the rest of it, that there's no way that could be. It's simple, guys. It's not hard to recognize. As we said before, all they've done is add an identified number, which means the remainder are unidentifiable, which means they're so mutilated or something else in that regard that they can't identify whether they're a woman or a child. The point is that people are highlighting the fact that there's just no way the rest of what's there could be mostly women and children. How is that? How do you mean there's no way? You mean aside from the obvious reality, this is a war on women and children, that they're targeting women and children, that they've killed more women and children than any concept we could talk? Obviously, it makes sense. The point is that 34,844 as of the 30th was still the full number. They just showed you a breakdown in between there showing these are the ones that are identified. So the number of women and children also did not change. And the UN made that clear. But all they can do is keep screaming about how after the calculations, that number dropped to 51. Well, no, all you're adding is the numbers that are in the identified category. The others are unidentified. And that's been made clear 55 times. It's just shocking to me. And I said, are you seriously incapable of recognizing that the number you're pretending is now the total amount of women and children killed is actually just the portion of the total that is now differentiated as identified? The remainder are just unidentifiable. And on top of that, ask yourself how crazy it is that these people, it's somehow they think a winning argument to say, look, we win because they only killed 7,000 children. Like, think about dying on that hill. So you're okay with that? You think 7,000 dead children in the process of 7 months is somehow the win for you? My God, I just can't get past how bad all this is. Now, let's get to, I think I've got about 15, 20 minutes left. I want to make sure we at least get to the ICJ and a couple of important points about the protest. Now, this is just Dr. Lens Veritatis, who is highlighting that the opening segment, which shows that Israel only had, look, so that's the South African side. Israel only brought 3 people. Look how many chairs they're available. They're full. Okay. This is a monumentally big situation. I mean, it's huge. And they must know that this is coming down on top of them. And they send 3 people. The ICJ emergency hearing, Israel's blatant contempt on full display. South Africa attends in force while Israel sends a mere 3 representatives. And of course, South Africa is presenting evidence. Israel's actions reek of utter disrespect for the ICJ. Well, they've made that shockingly clear. Here is the opening statement. Delivers a powerful opening statement, and this is the South African side. And I'll let you play it for itself.
Since that request was made, it has become increasingly clear that Israel's actions in Rafah are part of the end game, in which Gaza is utterly destroyed as an area capable of human habitation. This is the last step in the destruction of Gaza and its Palestinian people. It was Rafah that brought South Africa to the court, but it is all Palestinians as a national, ethnical and racial group who need the protection from genocide that the court can order. We've heard boasts that Israel's army is the most moral army in history.
That's crazy.
And we've heard denials that there is famine in Gaza. For months, people, particularly in the West, have appeared unwilling to accept that the accusations are true. How could people who look like us and sound like us possibly engage in anything like genocide? But the evidence has to be faced. My colleagues will take you to that evidence, including evidence of continued bombings, attacks on people in so-called safe areas to which they've been directed by Israel, attacks on aid convoys, and of mass graves and the horrors of which the corpses speak.
Man. So the real important thing here, guys, is that it seems to me that this is going forward. I'm still skeptical about where it will end up, but I don't know how, if they've continued to follow up with additional information from what's happened since they originally presented their scathing and very clear information that showed that it was plausible they were committing genocide. They've followed up what they've done in Rafah. I mean, what they're discussing, right? You just heard in the opening statement, the starvation, all of this stuff has been documented. So I'm hopeful that this is going to go in a positive direction. Now, also realize that even if it ends up where they're like, yes, this is genocide, we rule unequivocally that happened, remember that this is still the responsibility of the Security Council and the UN to do something about it. And that's still completely controlled by Israel and the United States. So it's still a win, mind you, even if there's no legal accountability, but that will break my heart to see that these people don't go to prison because of all the things that they've done. But the win will still be that this is going to be cemented in public opinion. I mean, it's already happened. Let's be very honest about that. Even Israel's mainstream media, and they've admitted this. As they said, we've already lost. We have to admit that. That's a Haaretz article they wrote. And it's been acknowledged by their own people. They want I'm not going to break off on a lot of it because I want to save the time, but I believe that this is going to end that way. And so remember that can still be used to force action. But I'm not hopeful that the UN will, through the control of the US and Israel, will actually end up in a positive way. But here is one of the other presentations, and I'll leave it there. This is from Stephen Donziger pointing out stunning presentation today by superstar lawyer Adila Hassim at the World Court in support of the genocide case against Israel. Israel's killing of 14,000 children plus is a, quote, deliberate snuffing out of Palestinian life. Statements like that from these people, I find it hard to believe that it will end up with nothing. This puts their reputations on the line. If you're going to stand up and say that they're snuffing out life in Palestine and then rule they're not committing genocide, I don't know how you ever recover from that from a matter of respect and reputation. So that's why I believe this is going to end up against Israel, which I think is the public opinion at this point. That's what the world wants, even many governments. So I don't know how they get away from it.
Gaza's children have suffered particularly severely. more than 14,000 have been killed. Thousands more have been injured or lost family members.
I kind of feel like she sounds like she's holding back crying. But I mean, I could be wrong. I usually, these people have, pretty strong decorum, but I mean, it's hard. It's an easy thing to understand. It's a lot of death, and they've been combing through this.
While an estimated 17,000 children are unaccompanied or separated. Nearly all of Gaza's children have been exposed to traumatic experiences, the consequences of which will last a lifetime. Make no mistake, these conditions are a direct result of Israel's military onslaught on the besieged enclave, with full knowledge of the destructive consequences of this humanitarian crisis.
And I can't even believe this is not being covered by the corporate media. I mean, even if you pretend this is, how do you even ignore this? Like, this isn't even about the Hamas verse. This is just breaking down from a legal perspective what they've done. And I haven't seen a single covering point of this. Barely even when it first actually happened, which was a monumental, an earth-shattering moment. And still, and by the way, if those that watch this in the chat are saying that she apparently did cry. I mean, that's to me, that means a lot. These are people that go through some very serious things. They go through this kind of stuff, and if to reach them to that level, I mean, that's how bad this is. I don't know how anybody can comb through this stuff and not walk away being changed.
In these circumstances, the thwarting of humanitarian aid cannot be seen as anything but the deliberate snuffing out of Palestinian lives.
Right.
Starvation to the point of famine, obstructing aid in the face of famine, and killing of at least 200 aid workers.
It's so crazy.
For the court's previous orders to be effective, for the provision of humanitarian aid urgently and at scale, Israel has to be ordered to stop its military offensive.
See, that's the crazy part, though. That's already happened, right? I mean, from the ICJ, from the United Nations, they just don't care. Which, I mean, that's like the 57th UN resolution they just flat out ignore. I'm pulling that number out. I think it's somewhere accurate, actually, but I mean, don't quote me on that exact number. But the point is, there's a lot. And the reason I'm highlighting that, I think that's generally where it was last time I checked, somebody reporting on how many UN resolutions, but for all I know, it's more than that. The bottom line is it's not hard to see how they routinely disregard the ruling if it goes against what they want. The US does the same damn thing. And yet they somehow have veto power over what happens. I mean, that shows overwhelming corruption. Now, on top of that, let's just quickly go through some of these points that you should see. Here's Yunus Tarawi pointing out South Africa actually quoted the tweet that he highlights here at the ICJ. We've already shown you this as intent to genocide, one of the many countless examples. Here is Smotrich, one of the most wildly extreme. Moments before redemption, we must not hesitate. We must destroy Rafah, Nusrat, Deir al-Balah, wipe out the memory of Amalek. Don't forget what that means. They've already used that in the earlier presentation to highlight that they're genocidal. And he uses it again because it's important to them. It's biblical in their minds. And he's highlighting the idea that they need to kill every man, woman, and child. That's what that means. He says there's no half measure. Rafah, Nusrat, absolute destruction. They quoted this in their presentation. Thank you, We Are All Palestine, for highlighting that for me. Now, Alonzo Gurmundi points out something interesting. He just simply goes, wait, let me get this straight. The guy who banned pro-Palestine NGOs in Israel boasted about sending Gaza back to the Stone Age and called the starvation of 2 million people, quote, Israel's second war of independence? Is this the moderate who will save Israeli democracy from fanatics? Yeah, that's supposedly the person we're talking about. Here he is right here. Oops. Oh, it doesn't, of course, it can be translating, but it says diplomatic desk reporter. Here is what he says. Gantz goals plan. Oh, and here's Gantz, by the way. We're talking about the report. It says They're to return home our abductees. These are their goals. To topple the rule of Hamas, annex the Gaza Strip, and ensure Israeli security control. Annex. You mean the place that you already control and occupy? Like, these are political word games, guys. Along with maintaining Israeli security control, establish an American, European, Arab, Palestinian administration that will civilian manage the Strip and lay the foundation for the future alternative that is not Hamas or Abbas, PA. Return the residents to North. I mean, you can see this is everything. Remember in the beginning when we highlighted exactly where this was going to go and they called it blood libel? It's just grotesque how obvious it is and how the power structures, many of them in the world, act like you're wrong when they know and are involved with what's happening. These people are screaming exactly what they pretend isn't happening. How is it possible that we have the people like Matt Miller and Vattel and the U.S. government pretending that we're still not a crime has been committed? Matt Orfel highlights this old discussion from, I believe it was 2022, 2021. A foreign country bombed the offices of a major U.S. press outlet, accused it without evidence of harboring terrorists. Sound familiar? And a significant portion of the U.S. media spun the story to support the foreign country. Can you guess what country that was? The IDF gave the tenants of the Al Jalal building in Gaza, which included Associated Press, by the way, other news agencies, and Al Jazeera and residential homes, 1 hour to evacuate before bombing the building. How is it possible that, and it's a 60 minutes and 3 Israeli missiles later, here's the building, a press building, including foreign international journalism. Says the AP CEO, Gary Pruitt, said the news agency was in the building for 15 years. And, quote, we have had no indication Hamas was in the building. Of course, this should be relevant to what we're talking about today. This is the common practice. And don't forget, we just highlighted that Israel bombed an Iranian embassy, the consulate building that was connected to the embassy, which was part of the embassy. This is what they do. Nobody seemed to care. The corporate media completely gaslit people into thinking it was allowed to happen. And Derek followed up highlighting that right after that, don't forget, you saw a raiding of the Mexican embassy in regarding, I think it was Nicaragua, if I remember correctly. Basically, the point was you saw this bleed into other discussions where they said, okay, well, if Israel can do it, we'll do it too, violating the norms. Now, in regard to the aid being blocked, Cuds News highlights that during the South African hearing, it was mentioned that the settlers are blocking aid because that's what's happening. And everyone can see it. It's being backed by the Israeli government. You've got usually IDF members that are there protecting them and keeping them secure, backed by the Israeli government. And here's the video of them continuing to stop the aid trucks, throw the aid on the ground, destroy it, even though, by the way, that means they're starving the hostages too. Here in this video, you can see footage of attempts to block all aid trucks, even though Elon Levy will scream they're getting more than ever, from a CEO of Bezalmo, a right-wing NGO, who calls Israelis to join those crimes. So you have an NGO, Bezalmo, and the CEO of this company who's supposed to be that, NGOs arguably are, they present themselves as humanitarian half the time, and they're there stopping humanitarian aid to both hostages who are Israeli, American, and Britain and other places, as well as all Palestinians, while they're in a famine situation. Glick recently received an award for his activism during the current war from the Israeli parliament. And they are proudly blocking and destroying aid. Look at this. Look at what they're doing. This is on full display for the world. It makes me sick. And here's the one, I'll just include this for you to watch because we just referenced this. This is the human rights lawyer attacked. She was hit in the face while she was trying to stop them from destroying the food aid. And here's an example of one of these children. This is not just from starving from food. There's a couple of things that happened here. That's what he looked like before. Here's what he looks like now. Now, as I understand it, he's starving, but it's also because of some smoke he inhaled after one of their totally non-violent thing, their smoke, the gas, what do they call them? It's smoke grenades or what's the word I'm looking for? In any case, the point is we've talked about this many times. They act like they're using this, crowd dispersion. They use it on the Palestinian protest, the March of Return. People would die from this stuff. People go into seizures. They would act like they would never recover. These are chemical or biological weapons. And yet nobody seems to care about that. Abby Martin has covered this. So this kid inhaled some of the smoke from one of these things, and he's never been the same. And he's starving. Suppressed News highlights. Let me see how much time we have. I'll play this real quick. This is just a clip that he highlights. I'm not sure who. I've referenced this person before. I forget his name. He did this little clip here. He's simply highlighting every ceasefire deal and prisoner exchange that Hamas has offered Israel since the 7th, which they've refused every single time while screaming Hamas is the one that doesn't want it.
Here's every ceasefire deal and prisoner exchange that Hamas has offered Israel since October 7th. October 9th, Hamas offers Israel an unspecified number of women and children being held hostage in Gaza in exchange for 36 Palestinian women and children being held hostage in Israeli prisons. October 16th, a Hamas official says they'd free all Israeli captives in Gaza in exchange for 6,000 Palestinian captives in Israel. October 17th, a Hamas official tells NBC News that they'd release all of their Israeli civilian captives if Israel agreed to stop bombing Gaza.
That's the most important one. They already offered, we will release every single person we have if you just stop bombing all the civilians or anywhere in Gaza. Now, you could pretend that, well, we can't do that because then the Hamas will still be. That's the radicals saying that. I mean, literally the entire conversation from Israel right now. And they're protesters threatening to burn Israel down if they don't accept whatever deal Hamas offers at this point. And that's not because they care about Palestinians in most cases. That's clear. But they've already made the argument, no matter what the dynamic, we want you to accept that we want our families back. And they still say no. And at this point, they were pretending that Hamas had not offered anything. That's because they lie about everything.
October 28th. Hamas's leader in Gaza offers to release all of the Israeli captives in Gaza in exchange for all of the Palestinian captives in Israeli prisons.
There you go. Another important one. Well, fine. Then just give us back our prisoners, which was arguably the main point of all this. And they still said no. And that was before they got forced to accept the pause. So this was a game, and they made sure that they made it look like Hamas was doing all of it, just like every other circumstance. Now, based on time, you guys can watch the rest of that for yourselves. Here's an important point, getting into the votes. This just makes me sick. Brian, this is a person who's acting actively in the interest of a foreign country against the interest of Americans, who literally has an IDF uniform as he's part of a foreign military and is acting like he's an American representative. House Republicans just voted to end Joe Biden's arms embargo, which wasn't even what was happening. So first and foremost, think about how gross it is that you have Republicans voting to maintain arming of a clear genocide. That's complicity, guys. That's literally legally accountable. Those people can go to jail. But on top of that, that's not even what's happening. Joe Biden does not have an arms embargo. They paused one shipment, which, by the way, was still happening. That many of the other ones didn't even get paused. And on top of that, even if they stopped all their shipments, we know they can still deliver weapons that we can't even see. They go through channels that we don't even have accountability for. So either way, it's all a big show of we're on the good guy side and we're fighting against Joe Biden. It's all an illusion. Your government is supporting Israel. He says, we stand shoulder to shoulder with our allies, which aren't you, by the way, as American people. And he says on the throats of terrorists, which, by the way, he means Palestinian children. Now it's time for the Senate Democrats to prove the same. That's your two-party illusion game. But I said they just voted to openly support the Gaza genocide. Maybe Brian was wearing his IDF uniform when he decided to act in the interest of a foreign government at the expense of Americans. In fact, ignoring what the vast majority of Americans want. Hashtag Brian Mast is Israel first. Now, this is getting into the AIPAC point. Now, I wanted to play one thing about the protests, so I'm going to go ahead and skip this and come back to it. But AIPAC was busted smuggling cash to a pro-Israel candidate. These are not lobbyists, guys. This is straight up bribery, which is what lobbying is anyway. But the fact that they're doing stuff like this is what you think it is. This is direct influence of politicians against interest of Americans. These are crimes. Thomas Massey highlights how they put out a $300,000 hit piece on him because he was calling this stuff out. How do you not see how alarming that is? We're talking about AIPAC here. AIPAC comes out and tweets this. Being pro-Israel is good policy. I wonder why. 52 out of 52 AIPAC-endorsed Democrats have won. We're talking about Democrats, guys, not Republicans. How in the world do you think that makes sense? If every single person that they endorse and give money to happens to win. That's overwhelmingly clear influence on policy and politicians in this country from a foreign entity, because that's what they are. Ted Cruz comes out and says Chinese and Cuban communists are funding anti-Israel protests. Of course. Now, look, I'm not even going to say, for all I know, they are. The point is, it's absurd to argue that other countries that are funding, he's framing it as communist, which probably is the case in some cases, and plenty of these kids are showing themselves to be pro-communism. But in any case, that is the partisanship that is hiding the reality of what's really happening here. If you care more about the pink hair they're wearing and the claims of what they believe in than what's actually being highlighted and what they're truly fighting for, and the fact that the Palestinians they're fighting for are predominantly conservative and very clearly push back on the COVID-19 conversation, then you're being used. The point is, he's going Chinese and Cubans. Well, let's put it this way. If other countries are funding this, that's ultimately, in my opinion, people that are supporting the resistance against this because it interests them against the U.S. government. That's not the same as them infiltrating our country, which is what Israel does on a daily basis. And I wouldn't put it past any other country to do the same. But this is a person who is actively fighting against your interests, who has made almost more than $1.5 million from AIPAC. How do we not think that makes a difference? And Pompeo standing up and literally highlighting, these people are all leaning into the religious divide. I mean, all of this stuff. And Ben Shapiro comes out and highlights this, as Visregard says, don't assume that Israel will, or rather, Erdogan said, don't assume that Israel will stop in Gaza. If not stopped, this rogue state, this terrorist state, will sooner or later set its sights on Turkey. It's interesting, right? And as NATO ally, since we've always highlighted the fact that Israel and the United States will scream and screech and freak out about the fact that Iran is going to take over the world, that Russia is going to take over the world, that anybody they don't like is going to take over the world, even though there's really zero evidence to suggest any of that will happen. Certainly could. But the point is that I don't see them marching around the world, occupying countries and taking what they want with no justification. I don't see them doing all the things that you guys do on a regular basis. Like the Azov movement, for example, who you're funding, both Israel and the United States, who openly say they're going to take over countries and spread the white race around the world after they get done with Russia. That's not what Russia's saying, but all they do is point to their enemies while allowing and funding the ones that actually have that mindset, including Israel. And Ben goes, LMFAO, laugh. Pretty sure biblical promised land ain't in Turkey, my dude. You're not cool, dude. Stop doing that. But here's the point. Propaganda & Co., who you should follow, says, Ben. I mean, look, we just highlighted how Smotrich gave an entire speech with the Greater Israel logo right on the front of the podium. It's not a secret. It is an important and real, provable conversation, which includes the fact that Israel has designs for Saudi Arabia, for Egypt, for all over the place, for Syria, for Lebanon, for Iraq, and yes, part of Turkey. Does he not know that? Is he just that much of a dishonest person? That's crazy to me. And on top of that, I posted something about that. And the guy that we recently talked about, what's his name again? Josh Grazkow or whatever, simply highlighted this and saying that I was eating up Hamas propaganda. And my point is, how in the world are people either that dishonest or that bad at research that you're going to pretend the Greater Israel Project is not real? It is a provable. They've had entire conversations about it. They have openly pointed to what they want to accomplish. That is the real problem. And here's that discussion if you'd like to read it. A great article from Matt Ehret, The Greater Israel Scheme and Its Global Power Play, a delusional recipe for Armageddon. Last points we're going to make. I'm going to highlight this speech he just gave. And this is, Paul, prominent, to some degree, actor, comedian. I just want you to see that it's interesting to me. That doesn't mean we should blindly fall into this, because usually when I see mainstream endorsement, I'm skeptical about if this is some other play. I genuinely think, and I'm questioning this the whole way, right up to this moment, this included, but I feel that this is people that are picking up on the real change, and they're deviating, in my opinion, from what the mainstream is doing. And he's highlighting the fact that he's standing with this protest and fighting against the interest of Israel. If we can't recognize that the interest of Israel is as mainstream as it gets, and realize that these are people that are bucking that system to say this, and again, maybe I'm wrong, consider that, but listen to what he has to say.
The record straight. No one's talking for me. Stop weaponizing anti-Semitism. As a self-loving Jew, let me just say, permanent ceasefire, end the siege on Gaza, let Gaza live, impeach Netanyahu, fuck Raytheon, fuck Lockheed Martin, Jewish and Palestinian safety's intertwined, not in my fucking name, send them home. You do not need to cut off people's water supply in the name of Jewish safety. You do not need to bomb universities, bomb hospitals, bomb ambulances in the name of Jewish safety. You do not need to bomb children in the name of Jewish safety. Free Gucci Man, free Boosie, free Gaza. You can donate here. You can donate at unrwa.org.
Now, the point is he just, asked, he's clearly supporting this. So think what you want about it. I think it's fascinating that we're seeing this deviation from what they're pushing. Now, lastly, I just want to play this, and I think I've got enough time, but I'm going to have to take off. Glenn Greenwald did a really great breakdown. It's interesting because it's of this, what they claimed, an anti-Semitic walkout, because Jerry Seinfeld's wife apparently is like completely immersed in this entire conversation of funding and manipulating. I mean, it's horrifying that the people like this who have these big public faces are shockingly immersed with supporting genocide right now. And the point is that he makes this great breakdown of the campus protests and everything else. And I think I'm just going to end with this. I also want you to see the UCLA counter protest got bloody. This is our CNN investigation shows who was actually behind the violence. Guess who? The people that were fighting against the Palestinian protests. That's how this continues to be shown. And that's what Glenn Greenwald will highlight very clearly. Rania Kalek points out that the group of pro-Israel billionaires have a WhatsApp group where they're coordinating how to influence the U.S. response, including pressuring Eric Adams and the NYPD against Columbia students. Apparently, they got found out that they had this group, and they called it anti-Semitic that we pointed it out. I mean, it's alarmingly obvious. Business titans privately urged NYC to police Columbia. This is terrifying. These are foreign interests that are influencing Americans and against their constitutional rights. And you can read this more about it right here. Now, we'll end with this. In general, I'm going to play this clip. Make sure you watch this. This is important. But I'm going to leave it there. Make sure this is actually the one. Okay, good. I'm going to leave it there, guys. Now, ultimately, see, I definitely can break things down in a shorter period of time, but it's hard because I definitely enjoy, and I think people appreciate the deeper dives on these conversations, even though I speak fast, even when I'm taking a long time, that we take time to fully flesh these out and understand the deeper points around it. But I guess I feel like that's lost in a lot of people today, unfortunately, but we're trying to change that. Right? I don't want to fall into the TikTok, Twitter mindset where it's about shorter and truncated in time and just the surface level points, because I think that's the wrong direction. I really do. But in any case, we'll leave it there. Thank you for tuning in. I will be probably in the next couple of days, I keep saying this, but I believe we're pretty much back to our regular schedule. And I will be following up with some more information and some more views for you guys here. But thank you for all your support, guys. I couldn't do any of this without you. So thank you for being here. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
As we have covered frequently on this show, there has been an attempt over the last several months, really since October 7th, to convince American citizens that the United States is drowning in racism and bigotry against one particular minority group, which is American Jews. They have tried to convince these same people, American Jews, that the United States is not safe for them. They can't walk outside. They can't send their kids to school. They can't send their kids to college. There are roving bands of Jew haters all over the place, ready to maul and violently attack American Jews, even though none of that has happened. Even though essentially every encampment of pro-Palestinian protesters at colleges has been peaceful. Not overwhelmingly peaceful in the sense that CNN described the Black Lives Matter movement as being, while in the background there were buildings burning, but actually entirely peaceful. There have been no incidents of Jewish students being physically assaulted or violently attacked, let alone killed. The only real violence in any of these protest movements came from the pro-Israel counter-protesters, most of whom did not even go to school there, who showed up at UCLA and began violently attacking pro-Palestinian protesters, including old women and all kinds of people, throwing metal fences at them, bringing sticks there, fighting them physically for hours. And a big part of the funding for those pro-Israel protesters came from Jerry Seinfeld's wife. While Jerry Seinfeld has long been one of the country's most vocal supporters of Israel, and since October 7th has repeatedly defended the Israeli war in Gaza, condemned pro-Palestinian protesters, talked about how heroic he finds Barry Weiss. He went to one of Barry Weiss's events about the importance of combating anti-Semitism in the United States and about the need to support Israel in its war. Jerry Seinfeld was selected to be the commencement speaker at the graduation ceremony for Duke University over the weekend, where he also received an honorary degree. And as CBS News reported yesterday, quote, Duke University graduates walked out ahead of Jerry Seinfeld's commencement address. And there were actually a lot of booing. Quote, Duke University President Vincent Price's introduction to Seinfeld was drowned out by some people chanting, quote, Free Palestine, while others shouted, Jerry, Jerry. The 70-year-old Seinfeld, who has supported Israel since the October 7th attack by Hamas militants, recently sparked controversy over his comments on what remains acceptable fodder for comedy today. Here is a video of some of the students not attacking Jerry Seinfeld, not violently attacking anybody, but using their free speech rights to protest and chant as they walked out of the speech. They didn't try and disrupt it. They didn't try and stop it. They didn't scream over it. They just left in protest of Jerry Seinfeld's position on Israel.
Jerry is also serving as our commencement speaker.
There you can see students walking out carrying a Palestinian flag. They're just filing out peacefully while the students who wanted to remained. It was just a very peaceful, tranquil protest that didn't infringe on anybody's rights, and that is the kind of protest that the United States has long had, that the Constitution is designed to protect. And yet, one of the tactics that Israel's most devoted loyalists have been using is trying to claim that any criticism of Israel or its war is really motivated by racism and bigotry. They scream and screech, racist and bigot and anti-Semite, anyone who disagrees with them. They try to get people fired from their jobs and have succeeded in media and academia and elsewhere for criticizing Israel. They want censorship on college campuses and in the United States to protect this one minority group by claiming they're not safe, that the speech that people are expressing about Israel is actually a form of violence that makes Jewish people feel unsafe and attacked. The whole familiar script that the American right has spent a decade mocking and denouncing when coming from every other group is now emanating from Israel's most devoted loyalists. And one of the tactics they attempted to promote was to claim that the reason Duke students protested Jerry Seinfeld and walked out is because Jerry Seinfeld is Jewish. And they're just anti-Semites, and that's the proof. Here's the same Congressman Daniel Goldman from Manhattan, the billionaire heir to the Levi Strauss fortune, on May 12th, who said the following, quote, Jerry Seinfeld is a Jewish American who has nothing at all to do with Israel's foreign policy or military defense. Holding an American Jew responsible for the actions of the Israeli government is quintessential anti-Semitism. And there are all kinds of claims like that. Now, the lie of this claim is manifest. And the reason I think it's important to examine is because this is the fraud that has been going on in the United States for many months. Obviously, the protesters were not protesting Jerry Seinfeld because he's Jewish. Within these protest movements, there are many Jews who are regarded as the comrades of the protest movement because they share it, they help organize it, they help lead it. There's an exhibit within the Columbia encampment about the evils and dangers of anti-Semitism. The reason they protested Jerry Seinfeld is because Jerry Seinfeld is one of the most vocal supporters of the Israeli war in Gaza, which is what this protest movement is designed to denounce. Dan Goldman absolutely lied when he said, oh, Jerry Seinfeld is just some random American Jew, has nothing to do with Israel or the war. He's been vocally supporting it, and his wife, using Jerry Seinfeld's money, financed pro-Israel activities all over the country, including helping dox pro-Palestinian students and financing the pro-Israel counter-protesters showed up at UCLA and violently attacked the pro-Palestinian protesters. But the tactic of Israel supporters is and always has been to scream racist and anti-Semite at anybody who disagrees with them about Israel, at anyone who criticized Israel, and so that became the tactic. Now, just to illustrate the point, protesters, pro-Palestinian protesters, have been outside of the home of Nancy Pelosi almost every day since October 7th. Here from the local Fox affiliate in San Francisco, quote, protesters gather outside the home of Nancy Pelosi to raise awareness about violence in Gaza. I'm quite certain Nancy Pelosi is not Jewish. The reason they're protesting Nancy Pelosi is the same reason they're protesting Jerry Seinfeld. It's because they're supporters of the war that these protesters are denouncing. These protesters have been following Joe Biden around and disrupting and protesting every one of his events for 7 months. And I'm also quite certain that Joe Biden is not Jewish, but what he has in common with Jerry Seinfeld and Nancy Pelosi is that he is a vehement supporter of and enabler of the Israeli war in Gaza. Here's the LA Times on October 19th. Quote, no war crimes in our name, Jewish protesters say outside Kamala Harris's LA home. So there you have Jewish protesters going to Kamala Harris's home, a supporter of the Israeli war in Gaza, and protesting at her home. I'm pretty sure she's not Jewish either. Do you see the fraudulent narrative that's being perpetrated here over and over and over by Israel loyalists in the United States, trying to claim that anybody who questions this foreign government, who opposes U.S. financing of this foreign government, is an anti-Semite, even though it doesn't take much effort at all to see that the reason they're protesting people like Jerry Seinfeld, Nancy Pelosi, and Kamala Harris, and Joe Biden is not because of their ethnic background or their race or their religion, but because of their stance on the Israeli war in Gaza. I think false racism accusations, false bigotry accusations, moral panics, trying to convince American Jews that they're unsafe in the United States, all as a means of demeaning and banning and rendering evil and taboo criticism of this foreign government, are always things that need to be opposed. And I have rarely seen such a transparent fraud of perpetrating a narrative of racism in the United States for alternative and ulterior means as I've seen since October 7th in the United States. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.